Chapter 14. That Night Week. During the whole of the week, Irene had been thinking every other moment about her promise to the old lady, although even now she could not feel quite sure she had not been dreaming. Could there really be an old lady that lived up at the top of the house, with pigeons and a spinning wheel and a lamp that never went out? She was, however, none the less determined on the coming Friday to ascend the 3 stairs, walk through the passage of many doors, and to try to find the tower in which she had either seen or dreamed her grandmother. The nurse could not help wondering what had come over the child. She would sit so thoughtfully silent, and even in the midst of a game with her, would suddenly fall into a dreamy mood. But Irene took care to betray nothing whatsoever that Lootie might get at her thoughts. And Lootie would say to herself, "What an odd child she is," and give up. At length the longed-for Friday arrived, and lest Lootie should be moved to watch her, Irene endeavoured to keep herself as quiet as possible. In the afternoon she asked for her doll's house, and went on arranging and rearranging the various rooms and their inhabitants for a whole hour. Then she gave a sigh and threw herself back in her little chair. One of the dolls would not sit, and another would not stand, and they were all very tiresome. Indeed, there was one who would not even lie down, which was just too bad. But it was now getting dark, and the darker it got, the more excited Irene became, and the more she felt it necessary to be composed. "I will see that you want your tea, Princess," said the nurse. "I will go and get it. The room feels close. I will open the window a little. The evening is mild. It won't hurt you." "There's no fear of that, Lootie," said Irene, wishing she had put off going to get her tea till it was darker, when she might have made her attempt with every advantage. I fancy Lootie was a little bit longer in returning than she had intended, for when Irene, who had been lost in thought, looked up, she saw that it was nearly dark, and at the same moment caught sight of a pair of eyes, bright green, glowering in at her through the open window. The next instant something had leapt into the room. It was like a cat, but with legs longer than a horse, Irene said, but its body no bigger and its legs no thicker than those of a cat. She was too frightened to call out, but not too frightened to jump up from her chair and run from the room. It is plain enough to every one of my readers what she ought to have done, and indeed Irene thought to herself. But when she came to the foot of the old stairs, just outside the nursery door, she imagined the creature running up those accents after her, pursuing her through the dark, which, after all, might lead to no tower. That thought was too much. Her heart failed her, and turning from the stairs, she rushed along the hall, whence, finding the front door open, she darted into the court passage beyond, pursued, at least she imagined so, by the creature. No one happened to see her. On she ran, unable to think from fear, and running, ready to elude the creature on its stilted legs. Not daring to look behind her, she rushed straight out the gate and up the mountain. It was foolish indeed, thus to run further and further from all who could help her, as if she was seeking a fit spot for the goblin creature to eat her up at its leisure. But that is the way fear serves us. It always sides with the thing we are afraid of. The princess was soon out of breath with running uphill, but she ran on, for she fancied the horrible creature was just behind her, forgetting that, had it been after her, on such long legs as those, it would have overtaken her long ago. At last she could run no longer and fell, unable even to scream, by the roadside, where she lay for some time half dead with terror. But finding nothing lay hold of her, her breath began to come back. She ventured at last to half get up and peer anxiously about her. It was now so dark she could see nothing. Not a single star was out. She could not tell in which direction the house lay, and between her and home she fancied the dreadful creature was lying in wait, ready to pounce upon her. She saw now that she ought to run up the stairs at once. It was very well she did not scream, for although very few of the goblins had come out for weeks, a stray idler or two might have heard her. She sat down upon a stone, and nobody, Not but one who had done something wrong could have been quite as miserable. She had quite forgotten her promise to visit her grandmother. A raindrop fell upon her face. She looked up and for a moment almost lost her terror in astonishment. At first, she thought that the rising moon had left her place and drawn nigh to see what could possibly be the matter with the little girl, sitting alone, without a hat or cloak, in the dark of the bare mountain. But she soon saw that she was mistaken, for there was no light on the ground at her feet, no shadows anywhere, but a great silvery orb was hanging in the air, and as she gazed at the lovely thing, her courage revived. If she were but indoors again, she felt she would have fear nothing, not even the terrible creature with its long legs. But how was she to find her way back? And what could the light be? Could it be? No, it couldn't. But what if it was? Yes, it must be her great-grandmother's lamp, which guided her pigeons home through the dark night. She jumped up. She had but to keep the light in view, and she would find the way home. Her heart grew strong. Speedily, yet softly, she walked down the hill, hoping to pass the watchful creature unseen. Dark as it was, there was little danger now of choosing the wrong road, and, which was most strange, the light that filled her eyes from the lamp, instead of blinding them for a moment to the object upon which they should next fall, enabled her for a moment to see it, despite the darkness. By looking at the lamp, and then dropping her eyes, she could see the road for a yard or two in front of her, and this saved her from several falls. For the road, it was very rough. But all at once, to her dismay, it vanished, and the terror of the beast, which had left her for a moment, began to return and lay hold of her heart. In just the same instant, however, she caught sight of the light from a window and knew exactly where she was. It was too dark to run, but she made her way with all the haste she could and reached the gate in safety. She found the house with the door still open, running through the hall, and without even looking into the nursery, bounded straight up the stairs, then the next, and then turning to the right, ran down the long avenue of silent doors and found her way at once to the door at the foot of the tower. When first the nurse missed her, she fancied she was playing some trick, and for some time took no trouble about her, but at last, getting frightened, she had begun to search, and when the princess had entered, the whole household was hither and thither, all over the house, hunting her. A few seconds after she reached the stairs of the tower, they had begun even to search the neglected rooms, in which they had never thought of looking, except that they had already searched every other place they could think of in vain. But by this time she was knocking on the door of the old lady.